Hi, I'm Daniel. Welcome to my channel. Okay, so we love superheroes, right? And superhero movies and everything of that sort. But have you ever watched a superhero movie and wondered, why is the titular hero beating up thug number 65 again? Like, does he have nothing better to do? Well, I certainly have. Every single time I watch a superhero movie or a TV show, I wonder, is this really the greatest problem that the world is facing? Do we really need another superhero beating up a petty criminal? Yes, someone's bag got stolen, but I'm sure there are bigger problems, right? There are plenty of other stuff that our superhero could be doing. But then, what happens? Supervillain shows up and our superhero has to save the world. What could be more important than saving the entire world, or even the galaxy? Compared to Thanos coming and snapping everyone away, every other problem seems completely trivial. But then the problem gets solved and what? All these other problems didn't go away. Well, after the superhero inevitably defeats the big bad, then we are just left to wonder, what now? Both the audience and the hero is just waiting for the next big bad to show up. Then the cycle continues. But there is the problem. Conveniently, our heroes do not need to face actual problems, because they're perpetually stuck in this circle of beating up bad guy after bad guy. So, here's the question. Why do none of our heroes care about the climate crisis? This is arguably the biggest problem that our generation is facing right now. The threat level of this major crisis is definitely on the world-ending scale, right? To answer this question, let's look at the age-old debate. What's the moral code one should live by? What is the ethics that we should follow? Is it deontology? This philosophical approach suggests that actions are either good or bad, regardless of the consequences. What matters is the act itself. Deontology is governed by a clear set of rules. Or there is the other contender, utilitarianism. This ethical philosophy suggests that actions are good or bad depending on their consequences. So, if you do something and the outcome of that action brings more utility or good into the world than bad, then it was the correct action. So let's demonstrate this difference using a very clear example in the realm of superheroes. Should Batman kill the Joker? So here are the two arguments. Batman, him being a deontologist, has a clear set of rules which states that he shall not kill. Regardless of how logical it is to kill the Joker, it doesn't matter, because the consequences are of no importance. What matters is that Batman does not take the Joker's life. On the other hand, many of Batman's critics say that he should obviously kill the Joker. That is a utilitarian argument that is being made, which is, not killing the Joker will lead to more innocent people being killed, so in the end, it is justified, because it brings the most good into the world. Killing the Joker prevents other people from getting killed. Another less extreme example of this deontology versus utilitarianism comes from Civil War. Captain America represents deontology, and Iron Man is the advocate for utilitarianism. Captain America argues that violating the personal autonomy and privacy of superheroes is not okay, regardless of the consequences. Iron Man, on the other hand, argues that legislating superheroes would be better for the world. Despite superheroes having to make some sacrifices, superhero media loves to put these two ideologies against each other. It is a classic. Many of the supervillains subscribe to a more utilitarian approach. Ozymandias in Watchmen says the very famous lines, "Killing millions to save billions." This is clearly appealing to utilitarian logic. The same applies to Thanos. He wants to annihilate half of the universe so the other half can prosper. He argues that this is a worthy sacrifice and it will bring more good into the world in the end. Well, our heroes don't agree with this. They have a more deontologist leaning, saying that killing innocents is always wrong, regardless of the outcome. They do not subscribe to this ends justifies the means kind of ethics. Another more recent superhero media, where the conflict is explicitly based on violating a clear set of rules, is Jupiter's Legacy. Here the central premise is that killing a supervillain is just flat out wrong. The newer generation of superheroes do not agree with this. As we can see, these ethical questions can be very clearly addressed when dealing with supervillains, or even just some regular criminals. Unfortunately, not all problems can be solved using such ethics. So let's look at another example. The current climate crisis that our world is facing. Mass extinction of entire species, natural catastrophes, melting ice caps, droughts, wildfires, so on and so on. Arguably, this is the greatest crisis that not just humanity, but our entire ecosystem is facing here on Earth. So how come our superheroes are not doing anything about it? Well, let's try to apply our previously learned superhero ethics to this question. Should Batman kill the CEOs of big oil corporations? Or should there be a legislation forcing superheroes to make their costumes out of recycled materials? Is buying vegetables a violation of the superhero code? Well, these moral dilemmas just don't have the same ring to it, do they? That's because solving the climate crisis is not as simple as punching a supervillain. In more philosophical terms, there is no single good or bad action that our superheroes can make in order to overcome this problem. Some of our more powerful heroes could maybe reduce the carbon levels in the atmosphere, or even catapult all our trash into space. However, that would still not solve the problem. Well, it doesn't seem like it is possible to tackle this problem using deontology or utilitarianism. But deontology and utilitarianism are not the end of ethics. There are actually other branches of ethical philosophy that deal with exactly these kind of problems. So let's talk about environmental ethics. This is an umbrella term that contains various schools of thought. Going into detail on all of these approaches is not within the scopes of this video. However, here are some arguments that various proponents of environmental ethics put forward. So, there are some conservationists and environmental scientists who want to protect the environment. To do this, we have to prevent global warming and we have to preserve the ecosystem as best as we can. They argue that this is in the best interest of us humans. This is an anthropocentric argument that is concerned with the consequences for humans. However, there are different approaches. Some conservationists or animal rights activists and other groups would argue that it is not because it is best for us humans, but actually animals and plants have intrinsic value and we should protect them, not just because this is directly beneficial to us humans. This is a non-anthropocentric approach. However, there are even more drastically non-anthropocentric approaches. These have even found their ways into laws around the world. So let's look at some examples. There are quite two prominent examples of rivers being granted rights as if they were human. This includes the Wanganui River in New Zealand and the Ganges River in India. However, the farthest reaching and most radical of these has to be the Constitution of Ecuador. This states that nature has a right to integral respect. This includes everything, not just a single river. Well, this is not always upheld, but still, it is part of the Constitution. This South American example is fascinating. This approach is not limited to Ecuador. There are various other South American countries that have movements which embrace this kind of thinking. Probably the most prominent example of this is Buen Vivir. Buen Vivir promotes both the well-being of people and the environment and calls for a harmonious existence. This is more a way of life than a classically recognized ethical philosophy. This is because it is based on indigenous concepts and practices, as well as on critiques of capitalism. So, this form of ethics is very different from our previous examples of utilitarianism and deontology. It is not anthropocentric, it is not fixated on one specific action, and importantly, it is not based on European classical philosophy. So, in light of this new philosophical approach, why are there no superhero stories that tackle this? Why are there no superheroes who subscribe to this line of thinking? Is it even possible to get a truly Green Lantern? Well, maybe, but let's look at some of the difficulties that this would face. Superheroes are distinguished and special individuals. They hold immense power and influence, which for the regular humans is impossible to achieve. Their appeal largely rests on the fact that they are larger than life individuals. Their actions have meaning because they are so powerful, and also their actions have very clear consequences. That kind of power is only achievable for the rest of us through cooperation and some other external factors, such as usage of technology.
Look what they need to mimic a fraction of our power.
Superheroes are suited for ethics that are very action and consequence focused because their actions are so powerful and the consequences are so great. However, it is by no means impossible to think of a story where the central question is not, should I kill this supervillain? Or, if I have great power, do I have great responsibility? Superheroes usually only deal with questions of natural catastrophes when there is a clear action they can take to prevent it. For example, punching an asteroid that was bound to strike Earth. Or for example, saving a child from falling into the ravine. It is actually villains who more regularly engage with these broader issues of how humans are harming the environment and what could be done to prevent this. Villains regularly make the critique that humans are harmful, they're bad for the environment and other species and even to each other. However, this meaningful message is buried under murderous rage and megalomania. Their motive gets forgotten halfway through and they just want to kill people for the sake of it usually. The consequence of this is that our heroes can punch these villains and conveniently forget about the valid issues that the villains have raised. So, is it even possible to get a superhero who is climate conscious and have concerns over how humans are impacting the Earth? Superhero media has such potential, and besides, it is extremely popular. I think it should be capable of tackling complex issues that do not start with and also end with the question of, should I kill this supervillain or not? So, let's try to create a superhero story that takes all these previous considerations into account. All good superheroes need to have an engaging backstory and personal stakes. Let's try to imagine such a story. So, let's set the stage. We are in the Amazon rainforest. It is the site of frequent wildfires, mining and deforestation, and settler colonialism, kicking out indigenous people from their territories. Our would-be hero lives in the Brazilian Amazon. She's one of the Munduruku people. One day, she drinks from the Tapajos River and gets mercury poisoning. The nearby gold miners dumped toxic waste into the river, causing it to have a dangerous level of mercury in it. However, in good superhero fashion, our hero gets superpowers from this toxic waste. Let's say she becomes able to cleanse the earth of human waste. When the miners return, she goes to stop them with her newfound powers. She melts their machinery away, and when the miners try to attack her with their weapons, she melts the guns as well. That was the first conflict. She won her first fight and becomes the protector of the Munduruku territory. However, the struggles are not over. Here comes the second hurdle. The government starts the construction of a dam nearby. This puts the Munduruku territory in danger of flooding. So, what does our young hero do? Of course, she goes and destroys this dam, putting her in conflict with the Brazilian government. Our hero gains national and international recognition overnight. She becomes the figurehead for protecting the Amazon. This puts her in conflict with several groups, such as extractive foreign companies, the the Brazilian government, miners, settlers. On the other hand, she also finds allies. Various indigenous groups fighting to retain control over their territory and protect their autonomy. Even conservationists who wants to protect the Amazon for different reasons, environmental reasons. And our hero also finds unlikely allies in some corporations who wants to use her power to promote green capitalism. So what's next? Our hero has a clear goal of protecting the Amazon, right? But it is not that simple. What's the best way to protect the Amazon? Are you just kick out all the people who live there? And even her allies have conflicting goals. What's more important, protecting the indigenous territories, or is it more about wildlife conservation? Many conservationist groups frequently come into conflict with indigenous groups, trying to kick them out of their territory, arguing that they don't know how to look after the land. Or there is the conflict with big foreign companies who try to use her power for good. Is that ethical? Is that going to lead to good change? Should she commodify her powers? There is obviously a significant pushback from a lot of people. Some will argue environmental degradation and exploiting the Amazon is inevitable as it leads to progress and economic benefit for Brazil and the world in general. Others will say, what does a little girl know about any of this stuff? The potential for conflict and complex stories is enormous. And this is just an example I have thought of in an hour. So, I think it is time for superheroes to deal with more complex and topical issues. We had enough of the should I kill this evil person kind of storytelling. The second part to this video is coming. In this upcoming video, I will discuss another perplexing question that superhero media seems very averse to tackling. If you do not want to miss that, make sure to subscribe and see you soon.